Come now, let us pray. Alpha Draft, who art in fantasy esports heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy contests come, thy scroll be won, in the broadcast dimensions as it is in baller heaven. Give us this day our daily Scrilla, and forgive us our overly ambitious swag picks as we forgive those who swag pick against us, and lead us not into temptation to pick Dignitas players, but deliver us from TSM. For thine is the kingdom of fantasy esports, and the swag, and the Scrilla, forever and ever. Amen. Now, it was announced today that the OGN casters, Monte Cristo, Doa, Papa Smithy, who cast in Korea for LCK, League Championship Korea, Champions Korea, whatever it's called, essentially what used to be OGN Champions, will not be attending the MSI, the Mid-Season Invitational, which is Riot's event in the middle of the season for the best teams from each of the 5 regions and an international wildcard team. It was the event won by EDG last year over at SK Telecom in the final. And it's not just that they've turned down an invitation to go to the event or weren't invited, it's that they were invited, they were negotiating the fee, and they couldn't arrive at a rate which these casters say was not at an acceptable rate for the industry standard, covering other games as well. So in the statement they released, it said, "We failed to arrive at industry standard rate for our services and therefore cannot work as casters in Shanghai." They also make us elsewhere, they say, "We set out at the beginning of this year to determine average freelance rates in the esports market and conducted a survey of contracts received by casters across titles including Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Dota 2, StarCraft 2, Halo 5 and Hearthstone. We were surprised to discover from our peers that Riot's offer to us was approximately 40% to 70% of the rate received by talent for major events in all of these titles. We shared these rates with Riot in the hopes of reaching an agreement commensurate with the market, but while they offered a nominal increase, their deal remained far below industry standard for 2016. And elsewhere on Reddit, Doa himself actually commented, "The bottom line, though, is right now, Riot's freelance talent compensation is below the standard amount casters are receiving for every other esports title. If we simply go along with that, it sets a bad precedent for anyone who wants to make casting a viable career path. We can't do that." So first of all, I want us to say that one of the key points that Riot has often stressed within how they present League of Legends as an esport and their role within it was about how much the cost was to themselves to run esports. They often used to say that line, "Oh, we actually lose money running esports, we've invested millions in esports." They would often stress that as though it was something good they were doing. They would always stress that they were trying to or attempting to raise conditions for everyone in the industry of League of Legends esports. So stipends for LCS, they got the LCK to make a minimum salary agreement in Kesper. Likewise, people who are fans of Riot and like the way Riot do things, there's another area they'll always bring up. They'll say, "Hey, well, the reason why Riot can do things the way they want is because you know what? They're footing the bill. They're paying for all of this, so they get to have the final say." So that only works if Riot is the one paying it. If they're paying reasonable amounts, if they're paying enough money, and they're getting what they want in terms of the talent set, then they can decide how it all goes. The reason why this is a big issue is because League of Legends is still supposed to be the biggest esport in the world. I mean, now you could argue a case for CSGO, but let's say it is still. It has been for the last few years. This is the second biggest event of the year, of the circuit, of the tournament calendar, after the World Championship. The World Championship is clearly number one, but after that, this is the obvious second one. It's the MSI. It's the tournament where all the best teams, as in the best of each region, compete with each other in its own. To me, this is essentially a major as well. For me, the only two true majors in League of Legends is the World Championship and this. Now, we could all make a separate case, but I think LCKs is more competitive than Worlds, etc. But it doesn't matter. These are the two majors of League of Legends. So the prestige for teams to be there is huge. This is incredible. This is just after qualifying for Worlds, how important it is to be there. Likewise, the prestige for fans to want to watch this tournament, to see these epic matches is massive. And as a result, the prestige should also be there for casters to be doing this event. And likewise, you should want to have the best casters at the event if you're organizing it. Now, saying that, there should be, just as the best teams in the world will be there, the best casters in the world should be there to go along with them. Because remember, Riot does have in-house casters, but Riot is not trying to be just one little tournament organizer in a circuit. It's also trying to be a tournament organizer in a circuit and the big brother of the whole circuit who runs the whole thing. Therefore, they should act in two components. Yes, have their own in-house, but also bring in the best talent from their game since they're trying to run the whole game, and therefore there shouldn't be a clash there. It should be fine that they bring in outside talent if it makes for a better event and if they can afford it, which they can on both grounds. And you must note, this is an area I've always given Riot credit for, actually. That in past events, famously Season 3 Worlds, they did bring in Monte Cristo, despite the fact they had their own Riot casters. They had their own in-house talent, but they brought in Monty because they knew popularity, he'd obviously be up there and above much of their casters. In terms of actual game knowledge, he'd be up there and above a bunch of them. And in terms of technical skill, he'd be up there above it. So all the areas you want to check off, he would fit the match, and therefore it'd make it a better event to have him there. They did hire him, and it was a better event. It's also a point to bring up that an event like this, so prestigious and so important, should have the best experts for all of the key regions. Now, Korea is obviously a vitally important region, very likely to spawn the champion of this tournament. Therefore, they definitely need experts from that region. Well, who are the biggest experts on Korea right now in terms of the casting world? Monte Cristo, Papa Smithy. So those are the players. Even in terms of play-by-play, obviously the only expert in play-by-play at the moment is Doa. The ones in the West only get to do Worlds when Korean players are there. Now, a reason why it's key, the issue of why is it such a big deal about casters and which casters will or won't be there. Teams at events, no matter how good they might seem, and they might actually be, can be unreliable, or they might fail to go far. So you might have had an amazing final if it was SK Telecom, I mean, they won't be at this tournament, in the past, versus EDG like we saw. But imagine SK Telecom had fallen to a different team instead, and the hype wasn't as big for the final. Teams can be unreliable in that sense. Games can be unreliable. What looks like an awesome match can be a boring 3-0, like when SK Telecom 3-0'd KT Rolster. To some degree, it was not as competitive as we thought it was going to be in LCK summer last year. So games, teams, they can be unreliable. They can just be flat out boring. Casters, especially the top level casters, are a constant. They bring a certain level of entertainment, information, technical skill that they can maintain in terms of performance throughout a whole event. Doesn't matter what's happening in the game, who's playing in the game. And as a result, events can literally live or die in terms of how interesting they are and how much people want to watch them at certain points in time due to the casters. Now, obviously, when they presented it this way, one of the elements of this that people would say about Riot, like, oh, what a good job they did bringing in Monty, etc. That's not just altruistic. Don't be silly. Don't think they just did that to promote League of Legends and to be kind to Monty and the rest of it. No. They benefited from that massively, bringing in people like Monty and Doa. First of all, Riot needs Monty for entertainment, in lines with what I just said here. Knowledge, obviously go with that, and credibility. Those are the three areas you need. So in terms of entertainment, well, we all know some of the funny and memorable segments he's been involved with. The train whistle, the hype moment in the hype train for Season 3 Worlds with SK Telecom in the final against Royal Club. The one more tier for Europe at the All-Stars in 2014. No, for the Janna quick shot thing. I think that was that also All-Stars? No, it must have been Worlds, actually. I think that was Season 4 Worlds. There was the coup thing at like Season 5 Worlds. These are all very memorable moments that we've all seen in highlight videos that all came from Monty at these events, not doing pure analysis, doing entertainment. And so there's very few casters who can match him in that respect. In terms of knowledge, obviously he has fantastic knowledge about Korea, but also pretty good knowledge on the other regions as well. And his knowledge is respected. And so as a result, to improve the knowledge of an event, you bring in someone like that. And as a result, you had information about SK Telecom. You had information about Najim White Shield at another event. You had information about Samsung Blue that maybe some of the other casters didn't have or didn't have as much experience with them. And you bring in credibility. You bring in the guy who's the expert in Korea, which is the best region, and you bring him onto your event. You don't just have someone who's an expert on North America and watches some LCK on the side and have him be the big expert. He's not going to have the same credibility, even if he's a wonderful caster and a wonderful an analyst. So in terms of Doa, he obviously brings entertainment and this unique flair. No one has exactly the same personality. He's great at filling time. If you ever have a game with a pause or some sort of technical issue, he can fill time with his 80s references and movie things and making jokes up and impromptu humor and banter. Seems to synergize very well with any caster. And so as a result, you make for great combos and you can fill time, which is often a big deal at some events. He's also good at making a boring game interesting as a result. If the game is boring and there's lulls in the game or it's very slow paced, no one's fighting, they're all just backing off, that's where you need Doa to come in. And you don't want to just kill everyone with just pure info. That's when there might be a moment where he can give you some comedic relief and it'll improve the enjoyment and the excitement for the people watching the show. In terms of Papa Smithy, he's an expert on Korea. He's followed China and Korea for a number of years, and I would say is better than most of the Western casters in that particular respect. Now, in terms of Monte Cristo and Papa Smithy, they bring expertise on Korea. So even if Riot casters for NA and ELCS watch OGN and LCK, which I'm sure a number of them do, some of them even very closely, it's unlikely they watch all the teams and all the games. Likewise, it's also the case that even if they do, they will be processing them in a different way. If you're watching, but you're not going to have to actually directly do anything out of your work, they have to in some way understand some things and put it into their casts. But if you're not going to have to talk about those specific teams, you're going to experience the game and remember the game in a different way than if you casted that game. I know this from my own experience. If you passively sit back and watch something, then you kind of like take in some things, a few things are memorable, some things just go past you, you don't remember them all. If you're casting it, so you're watching it and you're processing in your brain, thinking about what's happening, thinking about what's going on in the game, thinking about what you're going to say next, saying things, hearing, casting, thinking. These processes all combining make you remember the game in a very different way. It imprints it on your mind. You're more of an active presence in the game as opposed to a passive consuming the game. And as a result, you remember it a lot better. That's one of the reasons why Monty has very good recall of games he cast. If it's just a game he watched, he doesn't always have all the details. If it's a game he cast, he has very good memory of specific plays, specific teams, where they were in history, the context surrounding them, because of the way his brains process them in a way that the Western casters won't have for certain teams, like the top Korean team, for example. It's also the case from past Riot events that China has already nearly always been underrepresented anyway. So we can't have Korea be underrepresented as well when these are two of the big regions competing for the title. Now, one of the main issues here, obviously, is the rate. Riot and them couldn't come to an agreement on the rate. Now, it's not that because this is the biggest game in the world and someone like Monty is one of the biggest casters in the world, it's not that he went in and said, well, since I'm one of the biggest, and this is what, I should have the most in the whole world, and in fact, I want 3 times what everyone else is getting paid. No, what happened is, as he said, they carried out a study of other top talent in other big games for major events, for equivalent-sized events in terms of stature and significance, and they found that they were getting offered less than these events for the top casters. Now, in other games, as I'm someone who's done many events myself, I think last year I did something like, I think it was 15 or 16 events like this. Not all majors like this, but I did a major. And the way that casting works in this sense, if you're on the analysis desk or a caster, is you have a day rate. And then you find out how many days the event is, you multiply it by your day rate, and then either that's the rate you get, or you negotiate up or down depending on what's going on with the event. And like if it's a very long event, sometimes they might negotiate for less money, but because it's so long, you'll be getting paid way more than you would for another event anyway. So there can be some wiggle room there, but in general, we work on a day rate principle. Now, MSI this year lasts 2 weeks, essentially, but it's only 8 broadcast days. Now, the rate that was offered to Monte Cristo, Doha, Papa Smithy, etc., was below the industry standard for an event that long in the other big games. So I'll give you some examples. The Shanghai Dota Major was the most recent recent Dota Major, and that was 11 days of actual work long. And Too Good, in his expose after he was fired by Gabe Newell, the head guy at Valve, actually mentioned that for this event, 11 days long, he was getting paid $12,000, and that was essentially a discounted rate, that he could have had more, he would have had more, and that was a lower rate. In CSGO, rates have gone up and up and up to where that sort of a rate, 12,000 for 11 days, there's people getting paid more than that on a day rate for some events in some leagues. Likewise, in Halo, the rate is higher. In League of Legends even, IEM pays a higher rate than what was being offered. I meant rather the Halo and the IEM rates are higher than what Monte Cristo is getting offered, and Doha and Papa Smithy, and likewise the CSGO rates are higher than what they're getting offered relative to the day rate in this sense. You have to realize as well, in League of Legends, they only have 3 big international tournaments a year. They have MSI, All-Stars, Worlds. You only have 3 opportunities to earn this freelance money, aside from your normal job. Remember, it has fuck all to do with Riot, what they make in their separate jobs. This is about these events. So you only have these 3 events. So you want to earn the proper amount commensurate to other big tournaments and how much it's worth and the significance and your value as a caster. You've only got 3 chances to do it. So if they undercut you at 1, well, that's it. You've just lost money there. Dota 2 has 3 majors and the international. So that's like having 3 MSIs and a Worlds, except even bigger to some extent. So they have more opportunities to earn more money, and yet they're earning more as well. CSGO has 3 majors, and then dozens of other tournaments, including leagues that run day on day on day, so way more chances to earn lots of money, and yet they're getting paid higher than these guys are offered. I will be paid higher for some events in terms of day rate than what Monte Cristo, Papa Smithy, and Doha have been offered for this MSI. Now, in terms of the whole Riot caster issue, because people will bring up, yeah, but they've got their own in-house talent. First of all, don't imagine this is just a freelance issue. The Riot casters do not earn enough relative to the rest of the industry. This is an issue that was brought up on Twitter a few weeks ago, probably a few months ago now, maybe a month and a half ago, where we pointed out that not only did they not make as much in salary as some people like me, Monty, etc., when you consider how much totality we may earn for our careers, but crucially, one of the reasons we earn more is not only do we make a lot from the freelance events, but we have more alternative revenue streams. We have streaming, we have shows, we have our own brand that we're building through YouTube, articles, whatever else we're doing. We have other events we can do that aren't associated with just one company. Riot casters don't get any of this. They get the flat salary, and then what do they get for the rest of it? What streams can they have? What YouTube channels? Now, you've noticed it feels like Riot actually listened to this and they've loosened the strings a bit. Now you see that people are coming on talk shows and doing interviews, and now we see Jat has his own YouTube channel. This is all brilliant stuff, but this is all wonderful. So it's good that that's happening, but I'm just saying to fans, don't imagine that it's just because you're not a Riot caster that you don't get the top rate. They're not getting the top rate. Now, in terms of altruism, the notion that, they tried to present it, Monty, Doe and Papa, like they were doing this just for the rest of the industry. No, they didn't actually. They first and foremost emphasized that it was about not getting the rate, that they checked what the rate is, so they knew their own value, that they didn't feel like they were getting their value. Then as a final issue, they mentioned that they also thought it would help the rest of the industry in that scenario if they held to their guns and tried to get Riot to negotiate up higher or show that they weren't going to work for less than the average rate here. Now, obviously, they mainly did it for themselves, like I just mentioned there. But a knock-on effect and a bonus is that this will help other casters. Because here's the difference. If Riot could then go to another caster for a future event, let's say Worlds, and go, Monty is actually going to do this event only for this much, which is the amount they undercut him by. How is that other caster, who's presumably less famous, probably less skilled, less in demand, going to say, I want more? He's not going to be able to, is he? He's going to have to accept a lower rate as well. And so actually, it's true. Setting these standards has a trickle-down effect for everyone, and it helps everyone out in that sense. It's also worth pointing out, the event will not be as good without these particular casters. The games will suffer. I mean, for a start off, who are they going to get to replace them? Well, they already use the NALCS talent as it is. They're so popular, they get to do all the events. So presumably, I would imagine some of the people who will probably come in is probably more of the EU casters from the EU LCS. Now, famously, the EU LCS lost some head talent like Joe, like D-Man, etc. And they've had to bring in a new crop of people, and they're working their way through. Let's be real, they're not the best casters in the world. Many of them are rookies. Many of them are still getting adapted to it. Even the ones who have the game knowledge aren't necessarily as well liked or don't have the technical skill to the same degree. There's a lot of problems there that don't make them the best casters. So it won't be as simple as just plugging and playing them in and they'll be just as good as Monty, Doa and Pop. No, that won't be the case. Fans will miss these particular names, particularly Doa and Monty, obviously. There's no way to just put in an EU LCS caster, even if they were as good, and have fans not miss these people, because these people are more popular as well. And more importantly, Riot could still fix this now. If Riot just went to them, agreed, not necessarily to their demands or whatever, but to a higher rate, and that was agreed upon by both parties, and I'm sure ultimately Monty, Doa and all of them want to do the event. Remember, it is still prestigious to be at a big major tournament, but if they made some sort of negotiation, I'm sure Riot could fix this problem tomorrow if they wanted to. Now, what's interesting is Panky, who formerly was a caster in League of Legends for, you might remember some of the IEM events in Season 2, Season 3, and I believe at one point in time probably applied to or wanted to work for Riot as an LCS caster of some kind, because he was working in LCS, EU LCS as the Observer, I think. He made some points on Twitter, which I thought actually accurately encapsulated some of the rhetoric that would be against this sort of move by Monty, Doe, etc. So I thought I would refer to some of that to explain essentially sort of a Q&A section at the end. So he said, count up the amount of casters Riot has. The fact they even offer spots to outside sources is generous on its own. Then why do they do it? Oh, generosity. That's the reason why Riot has outside casters, such as one of the biggest casters in the world, who casts the best league and has seen almost every Korean game, Monte Cristo. They just do that for generosity, right? No, ridiculous. They do it because it helps their event directly. They get better casting. It helps them in terms of popularity. Monty is much more popular than a number of the casters who will be at this event, and people would be annoyed at his omission, so it would hurt your popularity of your event to not have him in that sense, and it helps them in terms of credibility. This is an expert on Korea, the most important region. He then said, if you want to decline after that, fine, but don't go acting like it's some moral obligation to other freelancers. I mean, as I said, they haven't even said that's the reason that prompted this. The main reason was it's not to the level they wanted. They didn't agree with it, and then they pointed out that this would also help the industry. They never presented it as such that. That's actually kind of disingenuous to imply that they did make that the primary and sole reason or whatever. Like, that's not the way they did it. That was a side effect. It was an afterthought. Here's another quote. as one of those freelancers, great, well, I mean, you're obviously comparable to Monte Cristo, right? Attending, I mean, I've had to explain who the fuck you are in this actual video, mate, because a lot of people won't remember and have never seen you cast. So as a result, you're probably not in as much demand. So as one of those freelancers, attending an event the size of MSI brings in far more than just the money. You can only spend the money, though. That's the problem, isn't it? You know that feeling where a girl kisses you? Unfortunately, when it comes to your rent, you can't actually give that to your landlord. He doesn't do anything with that. Being offered is an honour. Not so much. It's only an honour if you're someone who maybe doesn't deserve to be at the event, or it's maybe someone who's getting a chance to be there or something like that. If you're the best and the company says we want the best and we're willing to hire the best and you are the best, and then they pay you a rate that's commensurate to being the best, then it is an honour and a respect that they ask you to do it. But it's also an honour for them to have you because you're the best. Therefore, you're honouring their event by attending it. So spinning it that way is such a little slave mentality. The people like who are like Riot workers that like, I'm not going to buy that bullshit. Sorry, guys. So, first of all, you're not the best caster in the world. Therefore, it's a totally different situation. It would be an honour for you to be invited. It's an honour for Monty to be invited, and it's also an honour that he does their event, and that he gives them credibility, and that he takes part in the process, and he cooperates with them, he collaborates with them, and he helps make the event better, just as they help him to make a salary, and they help him be part of a wonderful event. It's a relationship in that sense. It's not some sort of like rich guy like, oh, I'm very magnanimous, so have a few crumbs from the table. Tell the servant boy Christo he can take the leftovers, but be sure to be back here 6 a.m. sharp in the morning. No, that's not the world we live in. Might be the world you live in. It's not the world Monty lives in, though. And he then had this comment: I can assure you the numbers given would have paid the bills for the hours spent working and some. Oh, right. Is that the way people should live in a capitalist society, is it? What they should do is only basically charge like cost. Like, you know, this is what it would take to pay the bills and the amount of hours that I was working here. That's all it would take. Oh, and a little bit extra. Yeah, and some. Yeah, that's all I need. I mean, does Riot only charge for skins the cost of the bills to run the computers and the servers and the artists to do them all? I don't think they do. I think they try and make a profit. I think it's a business, and because they have something they offer, they supply something that is in demand, that people want, they try to figure out the number to be reasonable enough that people can buy it who want it, because it's in demand, and enough people will buy it, and then they will make a profit from that, and with that profit, they'll pay themselves, and they'll have a success in the world and reinvest into other areas as well. So just as Riot doesn't do things in this particular ridiculous manner, like just because it pays the bills, why would anyone else in a fucking business, especially a competitive one? It's a business, and business is based on demand. So when you're in demand, you can ask for more money, and you will probably get it. Now, the suggestion that Riot could just do it with in-house casters is sort of part of the tone of what's in this person's comments and a number of comments I've seen. Yeah, they could do it with the comment, and the event would run, and the games would run, and it would happen, and some people would like it, and the event would finish, and that would all happen. But you know what? It wouldn't be as good on all levels, and it wouldn't be as well received. Now, if I want me to just explain something to you, here's how I always break down casting. Because if you understand this concept, you'll understand why the event would be better to have people like Monty and Doa there. I always break down casting into 3 criteria. So you've got technical ability. Technical ability is like, how well can you talk? Do you trip over your words? Do you have a nice thesaurus of words? Can you use a lot of different synonyms? Can you string it together? Does it sound pleasing? Do you act well on your feet? Can you say things that you rehearsed well? Can you interact with others? All of these aspects of casting, essentially the mechanics of casting, are very important to being a top caster. Now, I'll give you an example. Someone like D-Man, who I think his knowledge was okay, and obviously his popularity is very good. This is one of the areas someone like that shines in. This is one of the areas that someone like this is one of the best in the industry. And even if you don't like the other areas, you must acknowledge technical ability in this respect. Meanwhile, some people I think are fantastic in terms of knowledge or are really funny or whatever, don't always have the same level of technical ability in that particular respect. And so then you go and you look at the middle one. Middle one was the knowledge base. Now, knowledge base is how much do you know about the game? How can you apply that knowledge? How can you fix that with your technical ability to provide this to the cast? So how much of an expert are you? How much do you know? How much have you watched? Okay, that's another area. So someone like in the NALCS, obviously someone like Jat is fantastic at knowledge base, just as Monty is fantastic in Korea. These people have fantastic knowledge base. That's another area of importance. But people know about those two, knowledge base and technical skill. What they don't often take into account, because people want the world to be fair, is they don't take into account the third one. And the third one's just as important, sometimes more so, popularity. I mean, I would phrase that different ways, maybe charisma, but it translates into popularity. And so as a result, if you have all three, you will be the biggest caster in the world. If you have just popularity and just technical skill, you'll be a very popular caster. If you have knowledge base and technical skill, no popularity, you will not be one of the biggest casters in the world, and you'll have a very hard time being liked, in fact. If you just have knowledge base and popularity, but no technical skill, yeah, you'll be decently big, but you won't be the biggest either. You have to have all three. And the reason why I bring up popularity is because most people ignore that and they go, oh, well, if he's good, then he should get the best job and the most money. No, that's not how it works, actually. It's also about how much in demand you are, how popular you are. So as a result, smaller casters who sometimes have one of these qualities really well, but usually have less in all three, don't tend to do as well and tend to get hired for these events. And particularly smaller casters tend to suffer from the lack of the popularity one. So as a result, Froscorin knows a hell of a lot more about Chinese League of Legends and LPL than Freak does, but most people would rather listen to Freak because he's much more popular. He might even have better technical skill. So as a result, it works. D-Man knows way less about EULCS right now, but I'm sure right now, most people would rather listen to D-Man over Stress, who's an EULCS caster, because, again, D-Man has fantastic technical skill. He's very popular even to this day. So I think this is a very naive approach. And to imply that, like, Riot's this generous person who's being kind and inviting these people. No, they're trying to get the best talent in the world to make their event better. And if they want to do that, they should pay the top rate, a reasonable rate for the rest of the industry, since they're trying to make esports big and make like they're a big a pioneer of esports. Then they should pay a top rate for that. And they can still fix this. Then you got to consider the fact that it's not like these casters are only pretending they're doing it for altruistic reasons. No, that's a separate reason as well. They're doing it to get a reasonable working rate, which in a capitalist system that we all live in, I don't know why people are suddenly like taking that as some big issue, because that seems fairly reasonable to me, that if you're one of the best in the world at a job, you should be paid one of the best in the world's rates, especially if you find others are being paid a rate for a smaller game, a world championship in Halo 5 or whatever the fuck it might be. Then there's also the aspect that, yeah, well, Riot doesn't have to do it with them. Yes, and Riot will suffer if they don't do that, and their event will be worse in that particular respect. So, pay the Scrilla if you want the killers.